Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my top 10 must-draft players for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to be talking about 10 players that I believe to be must-draft candidates based upon where they are going at their current ADP. But before we get on into the video, I would like to ask if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I'd also like to let you guys know that my rankings are available for free, link down below in the description as well as in the pinned comment. So without further ado, let's get into the video. My first must draft player of today's video is MYLES, running back of the Miami Dolphins. ADP right now, running back 28 off the board. Typically you see him go anywhere from the 4th to the 6th round in drafts. Sometimes he falls even further, but anywhere in that range, typically in the 5th round, is when I'm really looking to target MYLES. MYLES ADP has gone all over the place because in week 1 of the preseason, MYLES appeared to be kind of shit out of luck in a way because Salvon Ahmed got these touches. You also saw Malcolm Brown get a lot of touches, and it appeared that this was going to be a locked and loaded running back by committee in Miami, but in week number 2, we saw MYLES just silence the haters and look very, very good in that game. I believe MYLES is the lead back in Miami, and I believe he has the potential to be a top 12 running back. Last year, when Matt Breida and Jordan Howard were not the starters of the team, when MYLES became the lead dog there, he was putting up multiple weeks of top 12 performances. I believe that this Miami Dolphins offense is going to be a lot better this season. They fire Chan Gailey. They bring in a double-headed offensive coordinator group there, and I believe this offense is going to be a lot better this season, especially under the second year of Tua Tagovailoa, and I think MYLES has a lot of opportunity to get both rushes as well as receiving work in this offense. In half PPR and full PPR leagues, that receiving work means a lot. Last year, we saw him get 41 receptions for 388 receiving yards. He also had 142 rushes for 584 rushing yards and 5 total touchdowns on the season. So I believe if MYLES is put in the correct role, which it appears he is going to be, this is going to be an excellent season for MYLES coming at extreme value off the board right now, running back number 28. Next up, we move to a wide receiver in Diontae Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, wide receiver 21 at current ADP. Now, last year, Diontae Johnson certainly did disappoint in a lot of games because he really struggled immensely with drops, but he continued to be force-fed at a very, very high rate in this Steelers offense, having 144 targets on the season with 88 receptions, 923 receiving yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns. Typically, when you get over 144 targets, you're going to end up with over 100 receptions. You're going to end up with over 1,000 receiving yards, and Diontae Johnson ended up falling short in both the receptions as well as the receiving yards. But at the end of the day, looking at the offseason as a whole, Diontae Johnson has been working to make sure that he can mitigate the amount of drops game in and game out. In the preseason, we did not see Diontae Johnson drop a single ball, and as Big Ben's favorite target in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, I believe volume is king in fantasy football. You're trying to chase the volume, and I believe Diontae Johnson is going to be seeing a load of volume in this offense this season. Next up, we have running back of the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones, currently coming off the board as running back number 6. And I believe that in a lot of drafts, Aaron Jones sometimes falls outside of the first round because people draft guys like Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler ahead of Aaron Jones. I have Aaron Jones ranked as my running back number 5 in all formats because I believe that Aaron Jones has the potential to be yet again a top 5 running back in fantasy football. He is coming off of 2 huge years in Green Bay, and basically nothing has changed. Aaron Rodgers is still there. Devonta Adams is still there. They still have a very good offensive line, and this is a team that is going to be putting up big points game in and game out. Aaron Jones's numbers are technically carried by the touchdown total. A lot of people after the 2019 NFL season started talking about how there was bound to be regression for Aaron Jones, and he was going to have a not so hot year in 2020. But guess what? He went from 19 total touchdowns to 11 total touchdowns and still finished atop the position at running back. I believe this is a team that's going to be scoring a lot of points again. Aaron Jones is a focal point in this offense. He had 201 rushes last year for 1,104 rushing yards, 47 receptions as well for 355 receiving yards, and 11 total touchdowns. Not a lot of people really like to bring up Aaron Jones's receiving volume in this offense, but I think that is a very good point to zero in on for Aaron Jones, as he's not going to be Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler in the receiving game, but he is going to get enough to give him that edge up to potentially finish as a top 5 running back in 2021. Next up, we have wide receiver of the Chicago Bears, Darnell Mooney, wide receiver number 45 off the board based upon current ADP. Last year, his stats were far from impressive, playing in 16 games, having 98 targets for 61 receptions, 631 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns on the season. But what you have to look at is past the stats. You have to look at what was actually happening game in, game out for Darnell Mooney. The problem with Darnell Mooney had nothing to do with his playing. It had to do with the quarterback position. This guy was basically always open, and Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles could not throw the ball his way. I believe when Justin Fields takes over for the Chicago Bears team, Darnell Mooney is going to have a much higher chance to succeed at his ADP of wide receiver 45. I could easily see him being a very reliable flex or wide receiver 3 on your team week in and week out. Even with Andy Dalton, I'm going to be honest, I believe that may be a slight increase from what we saw last year with Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky. Next up, we have Chris Carson, running back of the Seattle Seahawks. Despite the fact that this team has DK Metcalf as well as Tyler Lockett, one of the best tandems of wide receivers in the NFL, I believe that Pete Carroll is going to continue to try to just jam the rock down the throat of the defenses. I think this team is going to really try to run the ball last year. That is all Pete Carroll has talked about in the offseason. It is in Pete Carroll's DNA to run the rock, unless, of course, you're on the goal line in the Super Bowl, when in that case, you want to go ahead and throw the ball right to the other team. When it comes to Chris Carson, he is a very talented running back. In 2020, he played in 12 games, having 141 rushes for 681 rushing yards, 37 receptions, and 9 total touchdowns on the season. But if you look back into 2019, when he was healthy, playing in 15 games, he had 278 rushes for 1,231 rushing yards, 37 receptions, 267 receiving yards, and 9 total touchdowns on the season. He has back-to-back years with 9 total touchdowns. I think this offense is going to try to run the ball a lot more this season, and Chris Carson being the lead back there very clearly does give him a chance to finish inside of the top 12. Next up, we have quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray, currently coming off the board at quarterback number 3. Now, the reason why I dubbed him as a must-draft player over a guy like Josh Allen, over Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, is because Kyler Murray is typically the third quarterback off the board, like I said, coming off the board at quarterback number 3, and typically you can get a round or 2 discount on Kyler Murray when compared to Patrick Mahomes, and that's what makes him the must-draft target, because I'm not looking to draft a quarterback in the 2nd or the 3rd round, but a lot of the time, Kyler Murray falls into the 5th round, and I believe he has just as good of a chance as Pat Mahomes, as Dak Prescott, as Josh Allen, as Lamar Jackson to finish as the number 1 quarterback on the season. This is a team that really likes to run the ball in the red zone, but guess what? They don't really like to hand the ball off to Chase Edmonds on the goal line, so I think Kyler Murray has a lot of opportunity to acquire a lot of rushing yards this season. Last year, he had 819 rushing yards, and I believe he could easily eclipse that in 2021 and be at the 1,000-yard mark, which just gives you such an advantage at the quarterback position. Rushing quarterbacks are a cheat code in fantasy football. A lot of people talk about that, and Kyler Murray is a perfect example of that. Next up, we got tight end TJ Hawkinson of the Detroit Lions, currently coming off the board as tight end number 6, which I believe to be just about insane. TJ Hawkinson could easily be a top 4 tight end in fantasy football this season, or maybe get inside of that top 3 with George Kittle, Travis Kelce, and Darren Waller, and knock one of those guys out. TJ Hawkinson is very clearly the best target in this offense to throw the ball to for Mr. Jared Goff, and I believe he is going to be force-fed with targets. Last year, he had 101 targets, 67 receptions, 6 total touchdowns, and 723 receiving yards, and that's with Kenny Golladay being healthy for some games. That's with Marvin Jones playing basically the whole season, and now there is no semblance of a wide receiver group in Detroit. I believe Jared Goff is going to feed the ball down TJ Hawkinson's throat, and getting that amount of volume, even in an offense that's probably going to be bad, which is going to lead to them throwing a lot late in the game, TJ Hawkinson really does have number 1 tight end in fantasy football upside. Next up, we have rookie wide receiver of the Philadelphia Eagles, DeVonta Smith, currently coming off the board as wide receiver number 35. Now, his ADP took a huge dip, a dive, and a duck like he was in dodgeball a couple of weeks ago following his injury. But after his injury, the ADP hasn't readjusted. He's perfectly healthy, and he's going to be good to go in week number 1. At Alabama, this guy had such a good season in 2020 that he's one of the only wide receivers to ever win the Heisman Trophy. In 12 games, he had 117 receptions on 147 targets for 1,856 receiving yards, 15.9 yards per reception, with 23 touchdowns on the season. I believe that DeVonta Smith is in a perfect scenario here in Philly to become the wide receiver 1 on the team. Sure, Sure, they have Jalen Reagor, they have J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, but at the end of the day, none of those guys are going to be able to stop DeVonta Smith's warpath of being the dominant target in Philadelphia. Next up, we have running back of the Arizona Cardinals, James Conner, ADP running back 37 off the board. I just talked about Kyler Murray with how I believe Chase Edmonds is not the goal line back there, and how I believe Kyler Murray is going to vulture a lot of touchdowns in this offense. And while I believe that to be true, I still believe that James Conner has a very good chance of being the #1 running back in Arizona. A lot of talk in the offseason is about how this is going to be a 1-2 punch, a kind of hot hand approach in Arizona. Whoever becomes the lead back from training camp, from the week 1 game, whoever becomes the lead back is going to be the starter the next game. And if they run with this hot hand approach all season, with how unconfident I am with Chase Edmonds, there's a very solid chance that James Conner is the #1 running back on the Arizona Cardinals, and he's coming off the board at running back number 37. Final player of today's top 10 must-draft players is wide receiver of the LA Rams, Robert Woods, currently coming off the board as wide receiver number 14. I believe with Matthew Stafford under center, that is going to increase the amount of upside that Robert Woods has on the season. Robert Woods has already been, for the last couple of years, one of the more consistent wide receivers in fantasy football, and I believe with Matthew Stafford throwing him the ball, this offense is just going to run a lot more smoothly when compared to Jared Goff. Now, I don't think Jared Goff is some garbage quarterback, but I think Matthew Stafford is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, so that is obviously going to make the LA Rams offense a lot better, and therefore helping out Robert Woods a ton, who I believe could have a top 12 season in 2021, maybe even finishing inside of the top 5. So if you guys did end up enjoying this video, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. I know normally my videos are a lot more long form. This is a kind of quick hitting video, but I hope you did end up enjoying. I love you guys. Make sure you stay safe as always. Goodbye.